is a pleasure to welcome you this evening. My name is Petra Slinkard, and I am the Nancy B. Putnam Curator of Fashion and Textiles, as well as the Director of Curatorial Affairs at the Peabody Essex Museum in Salem, Massachusetts. And we are here today to celebrate a fantastic publication and the wonderful author who brought this book into being. This is a fantastic event because this is one of the first fashion events that the Peabody Essex Museum has had an opportunity to partner with our sister institution, the Boston Athenaeum. Just to tell you a little bit about PEM, PEM is located in Salem, Massachusetts, and there are very many reasons to come and visit. It is a place for enjoyment, enrichment, sharing with family and friends, as well as creative stimulation. PEM is a museum that focuses on art and culture, and it is a place where we gain insights about ourselves through our world and our special exhibitions. The Boston Athenaeum, Boston.com, called the city's best secret, most elegant and surprisingly accessible secret. Its historic building and reading rooms at 10.5 Beacon Street welcome readers, thinkers, writers, and learners in the heart of Boston. Since March, the Boston Athenaeum has produced virtual events for an international community of people who love books, art, history, and good conversation. Starting in November, we will initiate a modest fee for non-members to attend events and also launch a virtual event season pass, giving people access to more than 30 of their highly rated online events in the coming year, along with other benefits. Please contact at bostonathenaeum.org for more information. So not only are we pleased to be working with this reputable institution, but I also would like to call out specifically some of our team members who really helped bring this event together, as well as Evelyn Beato, who is a phenomenal person in the Boston area and extremely active in events like Boston Fashion Week and working with mass art. It is my esteemed pleasure to welcome you to this program, which is a sort of a kickoff to an exhibition that we're opening in November 21st, entitled Made It, the Women Who Revolutionized Fashion. So what better way to kick off that particular exhibition than to discuss this beautiful book, Supreme Models, Iconic Black Women Who Revolutionized Fashion. To date, there has never been an art book devoted exclusively to Black models. Supreme Models fills that void, paying tribute to Black models, past and present, from the first to be featured in catalogs and on magazine covers, but it also observes the newest generation of models who are shaking up the fashion industry by speaking out on racial prejudice and becoming social media sensations. Supreme Models features more than 70 women from the last 60 years. The book is filled with gorgeous photographs of the women and details their most memorable covers, campaigns, runway shows, and editorials. Black models have been influencing fashion and pop culture for decades, reshaping the standards and boundaries of beauty. This book is a celebration of that monumental impact. And now it is my pleasure to welcome our two guests, very special guests. Theo Tyson is the curator and avant-garde academic. She interrogates social, cultural themes of race, gender, identity, and sexuality through the lens of fashion, its histories and theories, married with historical and contemporary photography. Tyson is currently the Polly Thayer Starr Fellow in American Art and Culture at the Boston Athenaeum. So welcome, Theo. And then our special guest is Mr. Marcellus Reynolds, who is a celebrity stylist, former model, and entertainment reporter who lives in Los Angeles. Obsessed with all things style, Reynolds is the ultimate fashion insider, with editorials in British GQ, British Vogue, and Elle, walking, talking fashion Wikipedia. He is also a top wardrobe stylist, styling celebrities like Rebecca Hall, Sharon Stone, and Justin Timberlake, as well as leading a career as an entertainment reporter and a TV host. You've probably seen Mr. Reynolds on Access Hollywood, Good Morning America, and the Tamron Hall Show. So please do a virtual welcome of Theo Tyson, or Marcellas Reynolds. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Petra, for that wonderful welcome.
Petra. To cut that thing down, it's like it goes on and on and on.
I mean, and Marcellus, it's such a pleasure to be speaking with you, and with consideration of the fact that we know we can go on and on with your multi-hyphenate status. We talked about this a little bit, and Petra gave us a little tease of your background. So before we talk about the book and how you got there, let's talk a little bit about your origin story, if you will, in fashion.
So I guess my origin story is very simple. I was the gay kid in a African-American neighborhood. I grew up on the south side of Chicago, and I always loved fashion. That comes directly from my grandmother, who took me shopping every Saturday down to the Magnificent Mile in Chicago, and she only shopped at the best stores. She shopped at Neiman Marcus, Bonwit Teller, I. Magnin, Marshall Fields, the good one on State, not the one in Tower. And it just sort of showed me this love of fashion. It also showed me the happiness of fashion. You know what I mean? And then my mother was exactly the same, but she was like definitely of her time. So she wore like bell bottoms and t-shirts that said like peace and, you know, like that kind of thing. And she felt, one of my favorite memories of my childhood is my mother bedazzled everything. And I was sitting there with her bedazzling her jeans. And very early on, I got a job in retail when I was 15 in Water Tower, one of the premier shopping malls in Chicago. And from there, it was just this love affair, because fashion was the first place as a gay kid I was accepted. And it was the first place, unfortunately, that I was told I was like worthy and I was smart, and that I was shown that my opinion matters, because I wasn't on the South Side, sadly, because I was bullied. You know, most of my childhood and into my teens, I spent fighting or running, right. You know, and that was very distressing for me. You know, the people that should love me, the people that look like me, that should embrace all of my unicornness.
Right.
Me, I wasn't special. So it wasn't until I started working in retail around people of all races and sexualities that I began to discover that there was something good and, dare I say, wonderful about me.
Right. Well, I want to go back to something that you said about, you know, being the gay kid and being bullied. And one of the things that Veronica Webb says in her wonderfully written foreword in this beautiful book is, how will I go out and conquer the world today? And you talk about the challenges that you faced, and we think about modeling as magic as the first thing that we see, but we know that this book was not magic. It took 8 years. It was an 8-year process, and you had to fight through a lot just within the fashion industry and then within your own community, like you just said. So how do you go out and not just conquer the world, but make magic?
So I always say that fashion is armor, right? And I also say that fashion is nonverbal communication. So before you even open your mouth, fashion tells the world and the viewer who you are or who you think you are. And we dress for those big occasions, right? We dress for a wedding. We dress for that night at home with our man. We dress for that big business meeting. We put on our power suit. Or even if we're a kid, we dress for the first day of school, right? You know, you put on your brand new school outfits, and it's part of this. You're going back to school. It's fall now. Get with the program. Yes. You know? And so I always experimented with fashion. Being the little gay kid, I was very particular about what I wore and how I wore it. You know what I mean? My mother would set my clothes out and I would be like, absolutely not. Stand back, I got this. And I would go redo something, and I knew how I wanted to present myself. And I guess that was just an innate thing. And so I've always sort of played with this idea, and I wish other people played with this idea too, that you can use fashion to gain a modicum of respect, right?
Mhm.
You know, when I see like somebody dressed inappropriately, I always go, why are you making that sartorial choice? If you dress this way, it might make your life a bit easier. And I know that sounds elitist, but what we know about fashion is it's not about spending the most money on something. You could go to Target and get like a good, you know, pair of khakis or a good denim shirt.
Right.
So choices you make, even on a fashion level, and I think they're so important because that's the first glance that somebody gets of you, are so important. And they help inform your road, your way down the road, and make it easier.
Yeah, yeah. Your fashion is absolutely a language, and it speaks, it's like body language. It speaks volumes even when we're not saying a word. So those sartorial choices, I'm gonna use that as a segue to the choices that you made of these 70 phenomenal Black women in this book. First of all, choosing the 60-year period, because you could have done, yes, I've got mine here. It's got the, ignore the tabs on the side. I tried to take some of them out, but how did you make the choices and the selections? I know one of my favorite ones that I shared was of Naomi Campbell,
Wow.
that initial spread. And another thing, going back to Veronica Webb and that foreword, is talking about some of the largest expenditures for a model or these agency fees that we would have to pay. So you get this great job, but then you have to pay all these fees. You then again had to pay for the rights to these photos, but the models aren't making that money. So I want you to talk a little bit about not just the dynamics of procuring the images for your book, but the dynamics of capitalism and the commodification of models in the industry, and how photographers and other people are still making money off of their careers.
Interesting. I love that. Okay, so, God, there's a lot to unpack there. So I'm going to try to be, okay, where do I want to go? Okay, so first and foremost, when you look at Supreme Models, the book is an art book. So the most important aspect of the book is the photos. And since it's a photo about Black women, but it's also, since it's a photo book about Black women, but it's also a photo book about fashion, it had to be on point. It had to be the top designers in the world, shot by the top photographers in the world. You know what I mean? Especially since it was Black women. You know, it had to be like top tier A-list, because let's face it, race plays into everything. So even though this is a book about Black women and Black skin is always politicized, I wrote a fashion book. I wanted anybody of any race to be able to pick this book up and love it and understand it because of the power of each photo that was included within. And because of that, this book was supposed to cost $35,000, right, in licensing fees. And that included the photo editors. This book cost me over $70,000 because I could not short stop. You know what I mean? I couldn't take like a crap photo. You know what I mean? I had to get the best possible photos I could get.
Let's talk about one of the more expensive photos in the book. We just looked at one of Naomi Campbell. We've got one from Stephen Meisel, and there's a great story with that I think ties into how we're unpacking this and how you had to procure that particular image and how important it is to the book.
Yes. So the Stephen Meisel photo of Naomi Campbell, where she's wearing the wonderful Rifat Ozbek thing. It's a cover of a Vogue Italia supplement, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's my absolute favorite. It's the one, the black and white, full bleed. And full bleed.
Right, yes.
He did everything full bleed he could, which cost more. It's my absolute favorite fashion photo ever. It's Naomi at her most Naomi-ness, right? It's Naomi when it was the triumvirate, where it was Naomi, Christy, and Linda. And if they weren't on your cover or they weren't in your fashion show, you might as well wrap it up and go home. And it's shot by the maestro, Stephen Meisel. Well, very early on in the process, when I was trying to like license these photos, I was told by his team that any photo you wanted to use in the book was $2,500, right? $2,500 just for one photo. Meanwhile, I was trying to pay like no more than $500 for photos, right? So that Stephen Meisel out of the running, and he's my absolute favorite fashion photographer, and I think he's the greatest fashion photographer ever. Fight me. So I was heartbroken, right? But I couldn't afford him, so he was out. And I also couldn't afford Peter Lindbergh, who's wonderful. And Paolo Reversi also charged about $2,500 for each photo. So they were all out, which is heartbreaking. But specifically with Meisel, you cannot do a book about fashion and not have a Stephen Meisel photo in it, right? So Naomi Campbell was supposed to write the foreword for the book. And I sent her the layouts for the book, and she looked at the layouts of the book, and she was like, I don't like this photo. And there was a photo by another major photographer in the book that wasn't Stephen Meisel that I had already paid for. Mm-hmm. Well, I love that photo and I've already paid for it. And
at this point, you're over budget already anyway, right?
I mean, I was like bleeding. I was hemorrhaging money that I didn't know where I was going to get it from. I'm over here trying to like sell blood. You know, I'm like, what else can I do? I've like sold off some of my bijou. I sold an old Rolex. I've like sold clothes. I was at the point where I couldn't even pay my rent because I was so over in the money for this book and the time I took off from my life and work to make this book happen. So Naomi's like, I want a photo. I want a Stephen Meisel photo. And I'm like, well, I can't get you a Stephen Meisel photo. And she's like, well, whatever you do, take that photo out, the other one. So now Abrams has gotten involved, and Abrams like, well, you throw off the whole book if you take this photo out. Meanwhile, the book was already late to press. Like it was already late to go to print. Mm-hmm. So I'm in Naomi land now, and I'm like trying to like, you know, figure out what I'm gonna do. And I mean, there's so much back and forth and arguing. So finally, my literary agent is like, look, go back to Stephen Meisel's people, humble yourself, and explain to him what's going on. Write him a letter as if you're writing it to him. So I wrote this letter, and I mean, I went on and on, but I put my heart into that letter. I like explained to him he was my favorite photographer ever, and that Naomi photo was my favorite Naomi photo ever and my favorite fashion photo ever. I explained to him that I love Christy Turlington and Linda and Naomi and that whole moment in fashion that he created.
Right.
Weeks later, we still don't have an answer for him, and we still don't know what's going on, and we still haven't figured out this hole in the book, a major hole, because Naomi's section is the biggest section in the entire book, right? Mm-hmm. So finally, I reached back out to his team, and the gentleman is like, wait, you didn't get my email? And I'm like, no, I didn't get your email, or I wouldn't be on the phone talking to you right now. And he's like, well, I'm going to resend it. Apparently, he thought he had resent the email like a week prior. So he sends it to me, and it's this beautiful letter by Stephen Meisel. And we sent Stephen the galleys for the book, so he knew what the book looked like and who was in the book and what I was trying to accomplish. And he was like, this book is beautiful. It's long overdue. I definitely want to be a part of this project. I hear this is your favorite fashion photo ever. Here it is. Please use it any way you like. He gave me the photo, and it was the last photo that we cleared for the book.
Amazing.
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 And it's just, first of all, he speaks to your dedication, but also what other people that saw your vision, like your vision was shared by so many people. And what you said about, yes, it's a book about Black women and their role in the fashion industry, their huge role in the fashion industry, but it is a book for everyone. And speaking of everyone, and I believe perhaps there's another expensive photo floating around in this book somewhere of the illustrious Grace Jones. And so we have to acknowledge it's October. So it's LGBTQ History Month. So we are both part of the LGBT community. And we had a conversation a little bit earlier about how sort of wrought with fashion gay and lesbian and bisexual individuals are, and how important it was for you to have Grace Jones represented in this book. How much does she represent to you, to the fashion community? And also just speak a little bit more to kind of the escapism that exists in fashion and the solace that you found in it as a child and that we find in it now.
Well, you know, for me growing up, a fashion magazine was like the entryway to a world that I hadn't seen before and I definitely wasn't experiencing, right? I had this sort of painful childhood and I had to find ways to like make myself happy. And the people around me actually, my grandmother and my mother specifically found ways to make me happy. So my grandmother had Ebony and she had Jet. And in those magazines, I saw like a whole world that I wasn't experiencing. I saw Black doctors, I saw Black lawyers, I saw Black debutantes. And most importantly, I saw Black celebrities and I saw Black models. And I saw Iman for the first time. Mm-hmm. And Iman really informed my childhood because I was like, where is she from? She's from Somalia? What is that? Yes, yes. She was married to Spencer Hayward, who was this basketball player who was so handsome. They had a daughter and they always talked about this nuclear family and I never met my father. So I was introduced to a lot of things through Ebony, through Jet, and through my mother's subscription to Essence. You know what I mean? And so I always had this love, especially from models from that period. And Grace Jones specifically is in that 70s, that late 60s, early 70s period, that Battle of Versailles period, that amazing period. It was Grace Jones, Pat Cleveland, Beth Ann Hardison, Bonnie Blair, Tookie Smith, Iman, and of course, Beverly Johnson, the two queens. You know what I mean? The two absolute icons of the 70s. And Grace Jones for me was really interesting because she's always had her, you know, Grace Jones never had a weave. Grace Jones was never working her, you know, never had her hair down her back. She came into the game with her short cropped afro, you know. So she was always, you were always acutely aware that Grace Jones was Black and she was beautiful and she was stunning because of that bone structure and that almost preternatural possession she had. How she
and Grace Jones also has an androgynous quality, and that's one of the things about the book is it's subversive because it does address these issues of homophobia, colorism, the commodification of Black women, all of these different things that you're talking about, and yet you compiled it into this beautiful art book that we have. Tell me a little bit about kind of how every page is a story and that this was almost you creating a personal historiography of your life in fashion through these models over this 60-year period, from the ones that influenced you in Johnson Publishing, you know, publications from Jet to Ebony and Vogue and everything else in between. Just talk about how you approached combining all of these things and something that, again, so subversive that points to different struggles. You can see the timelines in the book and you can see where that really shows up. Talk a little bit more about that historiography that you were trying to create, that you did create.
Let's, so first, there's two things that are working. There's two things. The book actually covers 75 years, right?
75.
We say 60 because the meat of the book, once you get into the Supremes, it covers the last 60 years of modeling. And that's like the most important part, right? Mm-hmm. But look at the beginning of the book and you look at the trailblazers, the book actually starts in 1945. So it is the last 75 years. And one of the reasons there's so many new girls that are in this book, and this book will continue to be relevant much longer. We're celebrating the 1-year birthday, right?
Yes, we are.
We are. The book came out in 2019, but I had my eye on it, right? I wanted this book to still be relevant in 2020, and 2021, and 2025. So I really worked to include models who were breaking right now, who were about to have really big careers. And there was a lot of like guessing and a lot of like fretting and a lot of worrying about whether I got that right, because some models come into the business and they have a good 6 months and then you don't see them again.
The longevity of Black women and Black models in the fashion industry is tenuous at best, correct?
At best. But that's why you have models like Ducky Thot, and that's why you have models like Anup Yai, and that's why you have models like Iman Hammam, you know, and Delone. You have these wonderful new girls that have since, and Adut Akech. Let's not forget the queen, Adut, right?
Yes,
So,
yes.
girls that were really super new when I was writing the book in like 2018, and by the time I let it out of my hands in the early spring of 2019 to send it to the publishers, they hadn't gotten those covers yet. They hadn't gotten those contracts, but now those girls have all played out to be the biggest girls in fashion. So that was super important. So the book does cover the last 75 years. And when you said subversive, that's really important too, because this is a beautiful book on its surface, right? This is a beautiful book filled with beautiful, successful models. But what I tried to include in this book, and what I want the casual observer to get, is that I tried to put in all the pain, right? Mm-hmm. I tried to put in all the battles. I tried to put in all the microaggressions. So if you read the book, if you look at it, it's all there. It starts in the mid-1940s with the creation of ebony, which is where Black modeling started, because that created a need for Black models. But because before that, white magazines weren't putting Black magazines. So John H. Johnson created Ebony to be the life magazine for Black people. And therefore, there was now a need for Black models. But in that time, we were still battling colorism. We were still battling this idea that Black hair was, that natural Black hair was like nappy and not good, that darker you were, the less desirable you were. Mm-hmm. So wonderful models from that period are light-skinned, like Ophelia DeVore, who could actually pass for white. People thought she was Spanish during her career. And she worked that angle to get what she wanted until she decided to open her own Black agency. And, you know, Sarah Lou Harris and Dorothea Towles. It wasn't until like the 50s that a dark-skinned Black model finally broke through, and that was Helen Williams. So you get the idea of colorism right off the bat when you first walk into the book. And
right. Which is also, I mean, who you chose for the cover of the book speaks to that as well, because on its face, it challenges what you think beauty could be. And I'm sure we don't have time to talk about part of your stimulus for creating this was a book about models that had 1.5 Black models in it. Well, there we go. So there was another book that attempted to address models in the industry that was not, it wasn't complete. It wasn't a matter of it not being inclusive. It wasn't complete.
It wasn't complete. This book is bigger than my book, more expensive than my book, and has like over 100 models in it. Models that have appeared in British Vogue. It's the history of British Vogue. And you only include 2 Black models in the history of British Vogue, Naomi Campbell and Iman, when British Vogue was the first magazine, the first Vogue, to put a Black woman on the cover. The first Black woman on the cover of any Vogue was Donielle Luna in 1966 on the cover of British Vogue, shot by David Lee, one of the most successful,
notorious, yes,
photographers ever. And you don't include that photo in this book. You don't include Alec Weck. You don't include the divine Veronica Webb. You don't include Leah Kabidi. You don't include Tyra Banks. And Tyra Banks had a beautiful.
And I love that you're saying all of these names, because one of the stories that we're told, a very common narrative is, of course, there aren't that many Black models because you only see a few on the runway. So, and thinking about the subversiveness of this book, the historiography that you created, it could very easily be some sort of syllabus of visual culture. And I want to make sure that we can get to some questions. You've unpacked quite a bit with this book. And one of the things that the dear, a wonderful Iman,
It's 2:30 already. We just
yeah. Iman was talking to Alina Cho, and they were having a conversation about fashion and diversity. And she made the comment that it all starts and ends with Beth Ann Hardison when you're talking about fashion and diversity and Black models. So let's just speak a little bit about what Beth Ann Hardison meant and still means to the modeling industry, the fashion industry as a whole. And Annette Gordon-Reed also mentioned, like, the process of book writing is about discovering and not necessarily what you end up telling others. So before we open it up to questions, say a little bit about, again, and thinking of all the things we talked about with colorism and racism in the industry, how important is Beth Ann Hardison for this book, and one of the things that would make it such an easy centerpiece for a fashion and race syllabus?
So here's the thing. Veronica Webb, during during the book tour, she said at an event, she was like, Beth Ann is the oracle. So if you think about the oracle in the Matrix, Beth Ann is the oracle. Beth Ann holds the truth, and she holds the history, and she's not afraid to tell you about it. So she started her career in the late 60s, like 69, I believe, and she was discovered by Willie Smith, who is one of the few premier Black designers ever. So discovered Beth Ann and made her a model. Now she begins her career as a runway model, and she becomes highly sought after and a muse to people like Giorgio Sant'Angelo, Halston, Jeffrey Bean, and then she's one of the models that goes to the Battle of Versailles, which is pivotal in Black fashion, right? We can't talk about how the Black model breaks through in Europe if you don't talk about the success of the Black model in the Battle of Versailles, where 5 American designers go to Paris to battle 5 Parisian designers for the title of who the best designer in the world. And the American designers win. We're talking couturiers, and the American designers.
Stephen Burrows, including Black gay designer Stephen Burrows, was there at the Battle of Versailles. Yes.
So important. And they win. And it's because the American designers who were used to using Black models and bringing that personality to the runway took those girls over with them. So the French did their little, very, normal walk down the runway, turn at the right points and go back. And then all of a sudden, the Black girls come on with the American white girls, and the American white women also were movers, also knew how to work the crowd. It was like a dance performance. It was performance, and they won. And it was largely because the way that the Black models, and I believe there were 11 Black models in the Battle of Versailles out of like maybe 22, 23, it's the way the Black models moved and brought the clothes to life that the Parisian couturiers never saw before, and the press never saw before, the international press never saw before. And it opened the door for the Black model to tell this day, right?
Right.
Beth Ann then becomes this influential runway model, this influential model that's got her like sort of voice in the ear of all these high-end fashion people, both editors and designers like Calvin Klein, like everybody. And then she decides that she wants to, when she's done modeling, become an agent. And she helps open Click Models, which was one of the big models in the 80s, right? Mm-hmm. She is battling for diversity when a client would call and want like, can I get some blonde girls? Beth Ann was the agent that would be like, yeah, I can send you like a packet of blonde girls, but I'm also going to stick some Black girls in there. And how about a Latino girl I've got that's fabulous? And then when a client called and they were like, okay, we want these 2 models, and they wanted to pay the Black model less, Beth Ann would ask the question, why are you paying the Black model less for the same job? Why are you doing that? And so you have this person that actually has the ear of fashion and is subtly pushing diversity, inclusion, and fairness forward. And she's always been that person. She's always,
she still is that person.
she still is
And
that.
she still is that person.
I got to sit down and talk to Beth Ann while she was having a glass of wine, well, maybe a couple of glasses of wine, for like 3 hours till this day astounds me. And the fact that I get to call Beth Ann or text her, the godmother of fashion, who, that's what Diane von Furstenberg refers to her as, the godmother of fashion. The Black model refers to her as Mama B. The fact that I like actually even Beth Ann Hardison's name can slip from my lips. Like,
Right. And in thinking of, it's a dream for you to have a 3-hour conversation with Beth Ann Hardison, as it would be for me and so many other people, but I'm sure people are in a dream state wanting to ask you questions right now too. So Petra, let's see what questions we have. What can we dive into?
Absolutely. Well, thank you both. And we have some great questions. I'll start with the first, which is actually from the Netherlands. So you can see what kind of reach we have this evening. This is from Janice, who would like to ask, how do you think Black Lives Matter influences the way that we perceive Black beauty?
is that for me? Can I answer?
Absolutely, Marcellus, please.
Okay, so it's always been my opinion that fashion is the precursor to social change, and that's why the Black model is so important. So before something happens in the public and in the greater world, it happens first with Black models. It's almost like we prep the universe for what's next. So when a Black model breaks through, it's actually like what's coming next in Black culture. So when you've got a model like Danielle Luna on the cover of Harper's Bazaar, before she was on the cover of British Vogue, it's telling the world Black models are coming, that Black beauty is about to change. When the Black is Beautiful moment with the Grandassa moment, with the Grandassa models, actually starts to influence the way that Black people and Black women think about beauty and their skin color, that's a fashion moment, right? It happens within the fashion community first, and then it becomes like a whole movement. So believe me, the things that we're talking about as far as Black Lives Matter now, we were already having those discussions and fighting for those rights in fashion 2 years before this. But it probably didn't get out into the public in the way it should have because it was Black people talking about it. It's like the Me Too movement, where the Me Too movement was started by a Black woman, but nobody was talking about it until all of a sudden these white celebrities like Alyssa Milano and Annabella Sciorra started to talk about it. But we were already having those discussions, and all those discussions, I believe, happened first in fashion and then sort of spread out into pop culture.
Fantastic, thank you. We have another question here that sort of moves beyond the models. And the question here is, I wonder about the amount of Black editors and photographers in the business. Are we represented in this aspect of fashion?
So I'm on the Tamron Hall show last year during the book tour, right? October 10th actually was the date. And we're sitting there and it's a panel with me, Beth Ann Hardison, Janelle Williams, the incredible dark-skinned model who is my cover star, and Veronica Webb, the queen who wrote my foreword, right? So all of a sudden, Tamron asks Beth Ann about the need for diversity in fashion, diversity and inclusion in fashion. And Beth Ann was like, I'm tired of talking about diversity in fashion. I'm gonna tell you what we need to talk about. We need to talk about inclusion. And she was absolutely right. Inclusion means that we are hiring Black people and Latino people and gay people and Asian people behind the scenes, right? They're there to make those decisions. And what happens when you hire somebody of color is there's another voice in the room and knows a history that you might not know anything about. Think of it like this. If I had been the stylist on set when H&M put the coolest monkey in the jungle t-shirt on the little Black boy, I would have been like, we can put that t-shirt on a white boy, but we cannot put that t-shirt on that little Black boy. And I'll tell you why. If I had been in the room when Gucci was creating that line of sweaters that was like blackface, where it was part black and the lips were red, I would have been like, we can do that sweater in every single coloration, but what we ain't gonna do is do it in black with red lips. You know what I mean? And then I could have taken that extra beat to explain to them the history of the Sambo character in the United States. And then it would have avoided that mishap. We need Black art directors, we need Black designers, we need Black photographers, we need Black digital techs so that our skin tones are right. We need, we need that Black person and that person of color that actually brings a depth that might have escaped others to the room. Because we're still dealing with the fact that history has not been taught in its totality, right? That's the core of Black Lives Matter. That's the core of where we're at now. American history is Black history. American history is Native history, Native American history. American history is Latino history. And so please allow us to tell it, and allow us to tell it in its totality and in its truth. Not a dumbed down, washed out version of it. That's the fight we're at right now.
So we have a model who's asking a question, and this person says, I've been hustling in the American fashion world for quite some time, and I've heard that in the European market would react differently enough for me to perhaps make this leap. Would you be able to speak about the differences between the two locations for Black models?
Okay. We're done with that idea that models have to go to Paris, that models can go over to Europe and all of a sudden break first in Europe and then come back, right? That's a fallacy. So what you have to do as a model is you have to think about, you have to look in magazines, right? And you have to see, if you see a girl that looks like you and is your size, right? You should be able to get an agency in any market, in any place across the globe. Beauty is beauty, especially right now where we're looking at like Black models and plus size models and Asian models and Native American models have now, there's a brand new Native American girl that they found on a reservation that is like about to like break through. So I don't think you have to run to Europe because you're not getting what you want here. I think that if you're not getting what you want here, maybe you shouldn't be a model, and don't get caught up in the idea that the model is the end all be all to a career in fashion. I started my career as a model. I worked for 5 years and I was like this really good B-list boy. And then it came to an end and I loved fashion. So either I was gonna be a model booker because I love modeling and the business of modeling, or I was going to become what I became, which was a fashion stylist because I was the best dressed model that walked into a room. So especially with guys who just walk in with tank tops and jeans on, I would walk in and Ralph Lauren if I was casting for Ralph Lauren, or wear like Nautica if I was going to Nautica, or like have the right off the runway Prada. That's where all my money went. So find out how to reach me and DM me on Instagram, and I'll talk to you further about your career. Next question.
So we have Yves Saint Laurent was a leader in championing Black models in his runway presentations. While there is a greater level of diversity overall now, who do you think is truly championing Black and other models of color on the runway?
Okay, so historically there has always been Yves Saint Laurent, of course Karl Lagerfeld. We don't give Karl Lagerfeld enough laurels, really. You know what I mean? Yes, he uses a ton of like models. So a show with Karl will have 100 looks on 100 different models. But Karl really was responsible for the careers of Veronica Webb. He used Tamiko Frazier, who is the goddess on the runway. Think about all those girls that sort of broke through on the runway. Stephanie Roberts had beautiful moments on the runway for Chanel. So for Karl Lagerfeld at Chanel, and in his namesake, Christian Lacroix. You know, there's always been these, especially the couturiers that have wanted that Black model that brings that body and that attitude down the runway and makes a couture dress more. Terry Mugler even, you know, so there's always been models, there's always been designers that have been incredibly diverse and inclusive. I mean, right now, the biggest thing, and I think that's something that Theo and I were talking about, is it's not about one designer who's doing it. Let's talk about how many Black designers right now are breaking through. You know what I mean? It's Pyre Moss, it's Kushney. It's like there's so many. It's Byron Laws. It's Laquan Smith. There's so many amazing Black designers now, more than I think there's ever been before, that are really killing it. And that's actually pushing this idea of diversity forward. Because what the Black designers are doing is they're not just using all Black girls. They're using a multicultural cast, and they're showing true diversity. That's what we want. We don't want to be the one-trick pony like the Black British, like the all-Black Vogue Italia that you do once and never do again. We want to be equally included. Use me because I'm extraordinary, you know?
Definitely. Thank you. There are so many good questions and lots of really wonderful, positive comments. So I hope you have a chance to kind of scroll through them when we're done. But Priscilla asks if you could talk just briefly about androgyny and what that means or how it affects fashion.
Okay, can we go back to the Grace Jones picture real quick too, since we're talking about androgyny?
We wanted to deep dive into the Grace Jones picture and what's really important about Grace the fashion. She was this gender-bending, non-conformist model that really kicked the door open for the dark skin model, for the model who wanted to rock her natural hair, who wanted to wear an afro, and the unconventional model. One of the reasons why Grace Jones is in the book, because she didn't have that long a model career before she became a singer and, to me, an actress and a performance artist, is because of what she means to fashion. She is an eternal muse. Whenever you see a model with short hair, like Yasuni Brito or Cecily Lopez, they always tried to make Cecily Lopez into the Grace Jones in fashion layouts. She's always a reference, right? She sort of became more than fashion. She became this iconic ideal. Whenever you see a Black woman walking down the runway in a YSL smoking or in a tuxedo, you know, it's an homage to Grace Jones. And that's really important. And then she was like, you know, she was like a boy. Grace Jones would be like, I'm not a woman, I'm not a man, I'm somewhere in between, you know, pull up to the bumper, like all those iconic moments, you know, that she provided in music and theater. It's like, yeah. Grace is whole mood, #mood, forever mood. Still to this day, we're referencing Grace Jones. A catch, a Nuk Yai. Whenever you see a girl that looks like that, that's not rocking a weave, it's literally because of Grace Jones and her effect on fashion, her eternal effect.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. So we've got Nicholas who asks, was there anything unexpected or surprising for you in the course of researching and putting the book together?
Okay, Daphne Maxwell Reid, the queen, is in the room, and I'm actually freaking out because for those don't know, Daphne Maxwell Reid is the first Black woman who's on the cover of Glamour magazine. She was a prolific Ford girl while she was modeling. One of the first like Black girls to really break through. And of course we know her because she's Aunt Viv from the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. And I mean, who didn't grow up wanting her to be our aunt? I did. Okay, so anyway, hey Daphne. Okay, back to the question. Petra, hit me with it again.
Oh, research. What was unexpected?
There were
surprising.
Unexpected things. Okay, talk about unexpected. I didn't know that that Daphne Maxwell Reid was the first Black woman on the cover of Glamour magazine, the first Black model on the cover of Glamour magazine. I didn't know that Ebony magazine was the genesis of the need for Black models, and I didn't know why Ebony magazine was created. I didn't know this whole thing about, oh, Life magazine doesn't show Black people, I'm gonna do a Black Life magazine. There's just all these facts. What I want you to read, the book is subversive, and what I want you to read in the book is there are so many interviews by fair skin models, right? By light skin models. And they talk about how there's this myth that it's easier for light skinned women than it is for dark skinned women, especially in modeling. But so many of them, Aya Thorgren, wonderful in the book. She has a wonderful interview. Ilanka, oh my God, there's so many good. These women open. Kirsty Bowser, the queen. Okay, let's talk about Kirsty Bowser. Kirsty Bowser was this Black model who was biracial. She's half Swedish, I believe. They changed her eye color on the cover of Elle when they put her on Elle for the first time. They changed her eye color to blue. What an insult to change a Black woman's eye color to blue. Mm-hmm. And what I love about Kirsty Bowser's response to that was, look, I'm on the cover of Elle. I don't care. You can do whatever you want to me. I'm about to make that money and I'm about to get to the next level. There's so many gems within this book. Mm-hmm. You know, I could do a whole book about Sports Illustrated. All these models told crazy stories about, you know, being Black and being in Sports Illustrated. If you want to hear some dish about fashion, read Rashumba Williams. I mean, Rashumba gives the tea up in this book. Like, by the time I was done interviewing her, I felt like I had sex for like 3 hours. I was like, girl, I am spent. It was a roller coaster. Tamiko Frazier, you know, Tamiko Frazier was probably the one of the biggest models in the world. And she was told by a designer that her hips were too big. And she was all of a size 2. And you're the face of Maybelline Cosmetics, and somebody has the nerve to tell you you're the face of a global brand. You're in CVS and you're in Walgreens, and somebody has the nerve to say to you, well, you're too big for my collection, and you're a size 2 because you have a booty because you're Black? Are you kidding me?
So this is a question from NYC. It says, who are your favorite makeup artists or favorite makeup line for women of color? This person says, currently I'm living for Hourglass and Fenty.
Well, of course I love Fenty. You know, of course, you know, anything Rihanna touches, we love. To be honest, I'll tell you something, and I hope that it hits on the right way. Tom Ford does amazing colors for women of color. And he's one of the, to that question about who's pushing diversity now, Tom Ford always uses Black models in his collections. He always uses Black celebrities on the runway. And he has done a line of makeup where the whole spectrum runs. In fact, when this book came out, Janelle Williams, who's on the cover, was the face of Tom Ford Beauty. And I mean, Janelle is bomb. So of course I love Fenty, of course I love Tom Ford, of course I love the queen, Pat McGrath. And we have to get behind her and we have to support her as she tries to. And of course, let's talk about the queen, Iman. I mean, for some reason, when I talk to hair and makeup people, they don't even consider Iman's line of products. They're not fashion, supposedly. And I think you're sleeping on her because she's been around longer than you have. Mm-hmm. But she's been doing it longer than you have. Oh, and my friend talk about an iconic brand. Desiree Rogers, who you guys probably know from the Obama administration, she bought Black Opal, the iconic from the 70s and 80s makeup brand, and she's redoing it. And it's in stores now. Black Opal is bomb. And she's gone, I mean, so crazy trying to get the colors right so the spectrum goes from alabaster to onyx. You know what I mean? Okay, so there's an answer.
Okay, we're gonna try to hit as many of these as we can, but so here we have, what are your thoughts about prominent Black actresses or actors using Black creatives?
That's where it starts. Do you even understand right now where we are? And why there's so many Black hair and makeup artists working and Black stylists working? It's because all of a sudden Black talent started requesting Black talent. When Gabrielle Union and Viola Davis actually start talking about the fact that their makeup and their hair isn't right because they go to a wardrobe and they go to the hair and makeup trailer and the person doesn't know how to mix the makeup for their skin tones, that's a problem. But it's a problem we've been dealing with. When you look at those old runway shows from like the 80s and even into the 90s, and Naomi Campbell's a concealer is like a concealer that Petra would be wearing, that's a problem. That's because there weren't enough shades. And that's also because there weren't black hair and makeup people backstage at the shows. You know what I mean? So we have to take that power. We have to start asking for, you know, as a gay man, I have to start asking that there be more like LGBTQI people on the set. As a woman, you need to ask for more. It astounds me how male-dominated fashion is. Mm-hmm. So as a woman, you should be able to say, look, I want a woman crew around me. Mm-hmm. I want my stylist to be a woman. I want my hair and makeup person to be a woman. When I take my dress off, I don't want to have to think about who's looking at it. Like, yeah. You know, we have to all ask for what we are or what we want, because we subtly push things forward.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to take that moment just to call attention to an upcoming exhibition called Made It, the Women Who Revolutionized Fashion, if you're looking for more women. And someone had also asked where to purchase the book, and we have included those links in the chat. And so I'm going to end with this question. This is also from Nicholas, and it's, what's the next big step for the industry in terms of diversity and inclusion? Is it compensation, transparency, and equality?
Okay, so I'm going to say this. As far as diversity and inclusion, we're there, right? We're there. I mean, right now, like, it has not since the 80s to the the late 80s to the early 90s have there been so many beautiful Black women working, right? So we're at this place now where Black girls feel like they can sustain a career, right? What we need to really start talking about is inclusion. We need to start getting people behind the scenes. We need Black designers, we need Black hair and makeup artists, we need Black stylists, we need Black art directors, we need Black photographers, we need there. And I definitely think we're going to see more of that. My problem with this moment is, and I think Theo and I talked about this a little bit in a chat before, is this just a moment? You know, fashion is cyclical. So one moment it's Black girls are working, then all of a sudden it's Brazilian girls are working, then all of a sudden it's Asian girls are working. Is a year from now it gonna be back to just white, you know, white nymphettes, Lolitas, from, you know, nondescript girls from Europe? We have to continue to be in this place where we keep talking about Black models and Latino models and Asian models. And we also have to be in this place where we talk about trans models. And we have to be in this place where we talk about handicapable models and plus models, right? Mm-hmm. And it can't just be a fad. That's always been the problem with fashion, that people have thought that Black skin was a trend. Your humanity, who you are, is not a trend, period.
Thank you so, so much. I want to thank you, Marcellus. I want to thank you, Theo, Evelyn, Beato, the Peabody Essex Museum team, the Boston Athenaeum team. Marcellus, where can people find you on the World Wide Web if they want to ask more questions, or do you have another event coming up that people should look for?
This is, you know, this is the book birthday, and I'm going to take a break from promoting the book. So this has been my final, I think that's why I wanted to answer so many questions. And I appreciate it, because this is going to be like my little final break for just a little bit, you know, take some time off. Plus, I was supposed to announce my big news. I sold my next book.
Oh, congratulations. That's wonderful.
Supreme Actresses, the first ever art book devoted exclusively to iconic, historic Black actresses. And so I'm going to take some time off and write my next book and do some interviews with some actresses and try to create more magic like this, but create it for actresses. And you can find me on Instagram. It's Marky Mark, like name in lights, MARQUE-MARC. It's Marky Mark on Instagram and on Twitter. And slide into DMs. I'm always talking to people in my DMs. Unlike some people, I actually answer my DMs.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And actually, I think that's how Evelyn reached out to you on Instagram. So this is truth. We can attest. That's fantastic. Please check out on Monday, a virtual event, the film screening and live Q&A that will be taking place at the Boston Athenaeum. Dear Georgina and Dawnland. And again, please, in November, check out our upcoming exhibition, Made It, the Women Who Revolutionized Fashion. Is also the opening of our South Asian galleries. And again, in the chat, there is a link if you are looking on where to find Supreme models. And again, Marky Mark on Instagram. Marcellus, you are wonderful. Theo, you are wonderful. Thank you, all of you, for spending your evening with us. And we will talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Bye.